Shutdown with Zach and Jameer. My name is Jameer Wilson, and I'm co-hosted by Zach Wright. Today, the name of the game is the lockdown. Over the past year and some change now, the world has battled a pandemic that was unforeseen. COVID-19 took over headlines and began to shut down many operations and send a lot of businesses into a virtual platform. It also claimed the lives of 2.66 million people worldwide and devastated the U.S., where the NBA and WNBA reside. Unemployment spiked at an alarming rate due to business shutdowns and companies going completely out of business due to a lack of work. The NBA shutdown took place on March 11th, 2020, when it was discovered the Utah Jazz All-Star center Rudy Gobert tested positive for the coronavirus. The league canceled a few games that night and made it clear that the NBA season was going to be paused indefinitely. But after a few months of waiting, the NBA and WNBA returned in a bubble format to keep the safety at an all-time high and ensure that there would be no hiccups on the road to championships in both leagues. Both bubbles were great and provided signature moments that we will never forget. But more importantly, both the NBA and WNBA took a stand for justice unlike never before. The ruthless and disturbing murder of George Floyd and countless others sent shockwaves throughout the world, and protests took the world by storm. A push for change and a call to vote was a constant topic of discussion. With all that took place, we now have some time to reflect. So, Zach, where were you when COVID-19 shut the league down?
Before I start, I just want to talk about the irony of Rudy Gobert touching all them mics when he had COVID that whole time. It was really like some South Park shit. I just thought that was hilarious. But anyway.
Classic. Absolutely classic. Idiot.
Foolishness. But when they shut the league down, I was home on what was supposed to be spring break, which, turned into a never-ending stay at home. But, yeah, so I was at home on spring break. I was planning to watch the Pelicans-Kings game. I mess with Zion heavy. I like the Kings a lot. I mess with De'Aaron Fox and all them. So that was the game I was more interested in. But, that game got postponed as well. So I didn't end up watching that. And then, as you know, everything got shut down. And then it was a struggle to get your basketball fix. I remember they televised some random horse game where everyone was on Zoom playing horse on their little front yard basketball hoops. It was just, people were just doing anything to watch games. I remember one thing that helped me get through trying to find games and shit was I was watching the little hashtag NBA Together thing they're doing on YouTube, just watching a bunch of classic games. They were hosting on that, and then I was just listening to a lot of basketball podcasts. I'd been listening to them before, but I definitely started listening to a lot more. Shout out to Ola Smoke. Definitely, that's when I learned about Ola Smoke during the pandemic. That definitely was one of my favorite ones that I still keep up with to this day. But yeah, Jameer, how about you? What were you doing on D-Day?
D-Day, wow. It felt like it. It's funny because before that night, it didn't feel like we were actually battling a pandemic, because I heard little things here and there about school shutting down and stuff like that. And I'm like, wow, people are really taking this serious. And I didn't understand the severity of it. But that night alone, it just felt like the world really began to come crashing down, because I was about to watch the OKC and Utah game that night with my girlfriend, Kiana. And they announced that game was canceled. And then Dallas and Denver were playing that night. And I still remember the look on Mark Cuban's face when he found out the league was being shut down. He was just stunned. And I think the Knicks and Hawks were playing that night as well. I seen a little bit of that. So that was just a very interesting night. And then at the same time that night, also we found out that I think, if I'm not mistaken, Tom Hanks announced that he had COVID, and also Donald Trump, who was the president at the time, uh, he was instating a ban, like a travel ban. So it just all that night, I'm just like, wow, like, oh, this is real. Like, this is a serious thing, because I heard little stuff before, but yeah. And then when we talk about like our fix, like getting the basketball fix and stuff like that, I agree with you. Like, um, football season is over. They had already canceled March Madness, and just not being able to watch any basketball, it kind of sucked, because like, playing 2K was cool, but it's like, it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. Like, watching old games, or watching some of my favorite games, like the Heat and the Spurs in Game 6 when Ray Allen hit the big shot. That was one of my favorite games that I rewatched. I watched Game 7 of the 73-9 Warriors in the Cavs. That was awesome to watch. Just watching some throwback games, even going as far back as the Game 7 of San Antonio and Detroit when they played in the finals. So like many years ago, and just watching games like that and watching First Take, I think that kind of got me through until the bubble finally came around. And I think that's a perfect segue into our next topic. There were many classic moments that took place in the bubble, and the bubble was an atmosphere unlike we had ever seen. How do you feel? How did you feel the bubble went? And my other question to you would be: do you think they should do a bubble format again, at least for the playoffs this year?
I'll answer your second question first. Should they do another bubble format? Maybe it would make sense, like in the playoff, because at the end of the day, that's like a lot to ask of the players to do that kind of thing all over again. Players, coaches, refs, like they're literally trapped in a place without their families and friends for months on end. So I wouldn't expect anyone to want to do that again. However, I do think it makes sense for like a playoff format, or at least I think what they should do, honestly, because everyone's talking about you going like 1 through 16 in terms of like who makes the playoffs. I feel like that's something people have been talking about, but a big pushback against it was like the travel and all that would just be insane. So I feel like with the bubble, they can actually experiment with that and just take the best 16 teams and put them in that situation, and then have them just duke it out for the championship there. So I feel like if they do implement the bubble, that's how they should do it, and use it as a way to experiment having the actual best 16 teams. Because for the last like 20 years, it just seems like you have the 10 of the best teams in the league are all in the West. You have 6 teams in the East that are actually solid, and you have 2 scrubs who make it for whatever reason. So I feel like using that format to actually get the best 16 is like, I feel like that bubble type of situation is the only way to do that. Even if they we get to the point where they let fans in and stuff, just having that that Coliseum or that stadium basically for like all the NBA games, and that one in the playoffs would be the way to do that. So I think if they do bring the bubble back, it should be that, because at this point, the chance to bring the bubble back has passed. Like the players, like I said, the players clearly didn't want to do that. Coaches didn't want to do that. So using it to run a season is just not going to happen. But I think they can use it to experiment with that 1 through 16 format. And then what I felt about the bubble when it happened definitely was the most entertaining basketball for me since the 2017 Celtics. I think a large part of that was just like we said, trying to get your basketball fix, dying to watch some basketball. And then we'll talk about the WNBA in a bit too, but I was watching them. But when the NBA bubble came back, I was definitely excited for that. So I thought they were going to come back scrubby as hell. Everyone's going to be missing layups, missing all sorts of shit, because they haven't been hooping for months, some of them. But yeah, I was very invested. It was a much welcome return, and I think T.J. Warren going off was my favorite unexpected fold. Shout out to Jimmy Butler going crazy, putting respect on his name. Shout out to Dame carrying his team to AC to get washed. Shout out to Devin Booker leading the Suns to the iconic game winner over Paul George. But yeah, this is some of the many amazing moments in the bubble. And how about you, Jameer?
Yeah, nah. Cancun in 3 was one of my favorite moments alone. That beef between the Clippers and the Blazers is just epic. I love it. When Dame missed the game-winning free throws with I think Kawhi and Paul George were out, and he missed a couple of at least game-tying free throws, if I'm not mistaken. And then it was Twitter beef back and forth. And then when the Nuggets made their second 3-1 comeback, which was also amazing to see. Like, yeah, the bubble, I agree with you in a sense of I like the idea of testing the 1 through 16 format in that setting because I feel like that would be the best way to do it because you would heighten the safety again in that situation. But otherwise, I don't see a point of a bubble because I think at this point, like they've already done a decent enough job. I feel like again, it's been a weird season, just dealing trying to control COVID and you've got contact tracing issues like the All-Star game. Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons couldn't play because their barber had COVID and just other instances of weird COVID related situations. But other than that, for the most part, they've done a really good job. And as you said, also, I'm sure it was very emotionally taxing for the players, the coaches, and so on to be in a room and then go play games and then come back to their room and then practice and then go play games again. I think, I do think if they had a bubble, they could probably loosen some of the restrictions and allow family members in earlier. I think they could do that to offset some of the concerns that the players have. And I think really, I think the coaches, I think they got the shortest end of the stick because they had to wait for so long to see their families as opposed to referees and officials being able to see family members and players getting to see their loved ones first. And I think it was tough. It was incredibly tough, and arguably one of the most difficult championships ever in terms of just the emotions that were put into having to go through this bubble. And yes, again, when you talk about just the quality of basketball, I agree. At first, I didn't expect much because I knew this was basically like them playing the first 8 games were like preseason games basically. Because they were all getting their legs back. Everybody has done their own working out, but because of COVID restrictions, most of those guys probably weren't playing together as often as they should have. So the chemistry might have been off, and so on, because they hadn't played in months. So yeah, they spent pretty much a whole summer not playing. And the moments, the quality of basketball, once everybody really got started to get their legs under them, seeing Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray going 50 for 50, just battling each other, that was epic. The Joker showing just how dominant he can be. Jason Tatum, I think Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, that was really their coming out party. At least in the first couple rounds, they had a coming out party in the playoffs last year, and so on. So I think and even Luka Doncic as well, showing just how dominant and how unguardable he is, and how much he can make players play better and stuff. So I think it was so fascinating to watch and so entertaining. And even the beginning stages and the introduction of this new playing format that they have, which I think also will help determine the best teams. Because as you were saying, like there's like at least 10 teams in the West usually that are good and deserving of getting playoff spots. But with the playing format, I think that kind of offsets that.
Mm-hmm.
The new playoff format now, where you've got 10 teams and there's playing games beforehand, so I think that helps out with that. When we talk about a bubble, I think a part of the emotion that really took a strain on the players too was the social justice element,
Yeah, no
because
question.
it wasn't just the not seeing family members and you being locked down in a room and things of that nature, but I think it was the ongoing protests that were going on at that point. And I think, that's a perfect segue into what we want to talk about next in terms of not just the NBA, but the WNBA as well. Because even when we talk about the WNBA was very entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
100%.
Ultimately, the WNBA and the NBA taking a stand and fighting for something greater than themselves and fighting for a cause that African Americans have been fighting for forever is something that was great to see. You got people taking knees, you got people wearing shirts and protesting. The Bucks boycott, shout out to the Bucks. That was epic, and that was another like iconic moment. Like there was so many iconic moments. That was just another one
Right.
because you never would have thought that. Usually if a game is stopped, it's because of a league thing. But the Bucks decided as a team that they weren't playing, and I think that spoke volumes, especially because other teams stood up with them and also didn't play.
Yeah, I think we should definitely start talking about the WNBA a little more. Like I feel like they were the real MVPs with the social justice stuff. Like they actually had Breonna Taylor's name on the jerseys rather than like the NBA with those inconspicuous or cliche slogans. I thought that was mad corny. I did not like how they did that. And then when Jimmy Butler tried to take his name off, the NBA didn't like that because it was like they wanted to sell a product that is Jimmy Butler or whatever. So I just thought that was mad corny. But yeah, the WNBA, they definitely made big moves on the social justice front, and they helped get Senator Warnock elected, which is that just goes to show how much impact they were having with the social justice movement going on during that time period, and that's still going on, to be honest. Yeah, and also the WNBA's bubble did start before the NBA's, and so I was definitely watching those games when they came out or when they came back, just because I was trying to get that basketball fix. I definitely was enjoying it. Became a much bigger fan of WNBA, and shout out to AJ Wilson, Crystal Dangerfield, and Alyssa Thomas. Those are my favorites right now. But yeah, and viewership also went up 68% from the 2019 season. And that goes to show that if you put the WNBA games on TV, people actually watch them. I know me personally, cause the season started while I was in PA, but then I ended up moving to Baltimore. And I didn't have cable in Baltimore, so trying to watch the WNBA game while I was in Baltimore was so difficult because with the NBA, we're streaming that shit illegally. Let's be honest, people are streaming it illegally. And I just thought that just made me think too about like the conservatives talking about the ratings going down because of the social justice movement. Like honestly, the ratings are going down because we're streaming it illegally because we don't have cable anymore. But that's just an aside. I thought that was very funny how people were trying to use, the death of people caring about the death of others as a way to say like, oh, you need to worry about your money instead of this and that. But yeah, anyway, the WNBA getting on TV definitely allow people to actually see what their games are about, how the game's played in that league and all that. And I feel like I'm going to be more engaged in the WNBA from now on. And I feel like there's a lot of people who can say that. Shout out to them for what they did with the social justice stuff. They definitely, like the NBA got a lot of the credit and the praise, but the WNBA definitely did a much better job than the NBA. I have to say in regards to social justice. they're much more together than the NBA. And yeah, shout out to them. Appreciate what they did. How about you, Jameer? Anything you want to say?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that in terms of the togetherness aspect. I think the WNBA, like the NBA, they had to have a lot of backdoor meetings and had to really figure things out. Like, I mean, I'm sure there were a lot of meetings that took place. I think that the issue was that, I mean, there's such big egos in the NBA, and that they like there were some discrepancies between what people wanted to do here and there, and I agree also that the jerseys, they were okay, I guess, but
I thought it was stupid. I'm sorry.
it was kind of random, and it didn't. I don't know. I didn't feel like it meant much. I mean, it didn't have nearly as much of an impact in my mind as putting Breonna Taylor on the jerseys, because I felt like that was very important, and I felt like that was a very good symbol.
Mm-hmm.
The WNBA, shout out to the Seattle Storm, the champs, and it's funny too because one of my favorite players, Liz Cambage, she didn't even play last season.
She was there. The Aces would have won. That's the Aces on our team. Yeah. She was there. They would have won.
Yeah, right. The Aces got there with Asia Wilson. As dominant as Asia Wilson was, Asia Wilson wasn't enough. But I think with Liz, they probably would have won it all, because Liz is fire.
Yeah, she's tough.
So yeah, like I see Liz on Instagram all the time doing post moves better than a lot of NBA players I see, to be quite honest with you. Her post game, her high post game, and just her overall versatility as a basketball player is outstanding. So yeah, I think that would be fun to see next year.
Well, real quick though, what was your favorite, or what was the worst NBA jersey thing for you?
In terms of what?
Like the social justice names they put on the back. Which one was the worst one to you? I need to know. Like for me, it was education. I was like, I just thought that was like just the word education. Education is important, but like just putting the word education on the back of the jersey, I thought that was so stupid. Like, I'm sorry, bro. Like, what is that?
It's mad. Like, I wouldn't say that is negative, but I feel like it's random.
Yeah,
I feel like the placement is very random. I'll give a quick shout out. I'm gonna say one thing I do like before I get into the one I didn't like, I guess. The one I did like was I did like when players from other countries use different words from their native languages on their jerseys. I love that. I thought that was cool, because that symbolizes a united front, regardless of the origin and background of a person. I guess my least favorite. I guess I'll say my thing was I don't have a specific word that I would say. I think what I didn't like was when people, like, ironically, it's funny that we're going to mention his name, but this knucklehead Myers Leonard,
yeah.
Myers Leonard, when he decided, like, I'm not sure if he put anything on his jersey, but when players didn't put things on their jersey, and when they're not kneeling and stuff like that, like as you said, the WNBA had a better united front, and they had a complete front, where you had certain players like Jonathan Isaac not kneeling, and then it's just like, well, are we united? Is this something that is important? Is this something that we all should shed light on? And then the thing is, like, after the games and all that stuff, there would be questions asked about, well, why didn't you knee, this, that, and the third? And it's just like really, come on.
Like, if you feel some type of way about kneeling, so be it. But the problem is, like, by you choosing to not have solidarity with your brothers and doing the opposite act of standing, for example, you now become a martyr for like the people who are against social justice. Like Jonathan Isaac and Myers Leonard jerseys were going, their sales went up crazy following them standing because, you know, these people who are for the troops, blah blah blah, all that bullshit. They definitely, you know, respected those players more because they chose not to kneel. Even if you feel like, you know, even if you're down with the cause and everything everyone's saying, but you don't want to kneel, by choosing not to do that, you're breaking solidarity, and now you're becoming a poster child for these people to use in their agenda. So I just thought that was very corny. You're right, that definitely was the most corny thing. But I don't know. Yeah. Some of the words on the jerseys was just like goofy. So I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah. And, overall, I don't think that it had a negative impact.
It wasn't negative, but just
what I want to see. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say it was random to some degree. Like,
yeah, it was. Yeah, definitely. It was a bit random to some degree, and I think in the future, would I want to see it? No. I prefer the nicknames on jerseys before those.
Oh my God.
To be honest with you, but I don't like. Yeah, I'm like, you can have it. I'm not really the biggest fan. I think it would be more symbolic if they had if they did like what the WNBA did with like having like George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery or someone else.
Something we can remember.
Right. Right. Something that holds more weight in the social justice discussion.
Yeah.
And you have anything else on that?
Nah, I mean, I'm good on that. I have a lot to say about that, but we'd be sitting here for 2 hours on this episode, so I think it's a good time to just, you know, talk about where we're at today with this situation.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I think that last season, a lot of things like it just like seeing how COVID and then the killing of George Floyd, I think, was the one that really set everything into motion, and then just watching the dominoes fall and how the NBA season was impacted was just so interesting. It was one of the most interesting things I've ever seen, and to have lived through it, it's going to be something that if I want get older and have grandkids and stuff, I'll tell them about it because it was such a different time.
Really,
like playing meaningful basketball in August, in September, it's just interesting. Mm-hmm. So, and then that transitioned into this season, which will feature 72 instead of the normal 82 games. Started right like a few days before Christmas, and so far this season, we've had some hiccups, as we mentioned earlier, talking about Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons missing the All-Star game due to COVID contact tracing. Some things like other players being out, like the Heat players being out. You had Kevin Durant coming in and out of a game just because they were unaware of how to handle his COVID situation specifically. So it's been interesting, but where do you think we're at now? Like, how do you feel about where we are as far as the season, for the most part, being successful? And especially the All-Star game, too, which a lot of people debated us having. I think since the All-Star game, we haven't really had any issues. So how do you think about that so far?
I mean, like you said, it's overall been successful. I just think it's interesting how the players had to go through all that bubble stuff, and they're still somehow finding themselves in them situations via COVID. I mean, granted, I understand sometimes you're just, going to the grocery store, you catch COVID, but like, I don't know what they're doing in their private time, but the fact that it's still like an issue is very interesting. Like, you'd think some people would, especially for the people who are like not being responsible, because with the amount of people in the NBA getting it, I'm sure there's some people who are being irresponsible COVID-wise at this point. Like, it keeps happening for months and months and months. Like, it's not just, you don't just catch it by accident all the time. So, or it's like accident all the time, but you don't just catch it being safe all the time. Like, following the proper procedures, you shouldn't. You should be safe in general. So I do think overall, though, like you said, it's a success. They're about their money. They're gonna do what they gotta do. And like the only reason why it's 72 is because like the Olympics are everyone's expecting the Olympics to happen. So yeah, it's just all about the money, really. And I get it. I guess you gotta this the potential missing out on millions and millions of dollars. They have their TV deals and all that. Just all the politics that go into it. But I'm watching, so I guess does that make me a hypocrite? I don't think so. But because regardless, no matter what I think, they're still gonna do it. So it is what it is. But it just I'm just hoping that they can get through the season without any huge breakouts of COVID. Because definitely, like, the NFL, like, things were getting dicey at one point. I remember it too. I'm not a big football person, but I do know it was getting bad. And then, yeah, I'm just hoping that they can get through this season with every team playing at least 68 of the 72. Because I think it's going to be a point where certain teams, like the Heat, and I think the Grizzlies missed a lot of games because of COVID. Just like it's going to be hard for those teams to make up those games at some point. So, I feel like that'll be interesting when you get towards the end of the season and playoff season needs to be decided how they're going to be able to reschedule all those games, because that will be there's going to happen. There's going to be teams who miss a certain amount of games because the playoffs have to start at a certain point if they want to make the season finish in time for the Olympics. Yeah, I'm just curious as to how that's going to play out. Any other thoughts for you?
Yeah, I like in terms of the NFL. The difference between the NFL and the NBA is that the NBA is so much like the season is so much longer because like I think that the season length is the biggest difference because when you're dealing with COVID, if a player misses a game, there's only 16 games in a season.
Yeah.
So if you miss a game and you miss a week, that throws everything off. Where in the NBA, there's 70 plus. Like usually, there's 82 games in the season, and this season, obviously, with in a rare case, it's 72. But even then, COVID can't really it doesn't jeopardize you unless you're missing like 10, 20 games.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you miss one game, you can make it up, and I'm sure there are several contingencies that have already been taken into consideration because there's a lot more flexibility with an NBA season as opposed to an NFL season where you kind of have to get it right.
Yeah.
So it's and then also there are a lot more players as well where there's like 53 plus players on a roster in the NFL versus like 15 on an NBA roster.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot more that can go wrong and a lot less room for error. Where in the NBA, there's a lot more room for error. Just on that note, and yeah, I suspect that the rest of the season, excuse me, should take place without many hiccups. And I think the NBA has been very progressive. Like they've always been ahead of the curve and been very progressive about everything they do. Like with their bubble format, the only other league I think who took on a bubble format was the NHL, and both leagues had virtually no hiccups throughout their bubbles, and they've been pretty safe and pretty good with this COVID stuff. To be quite honest with you, especially considering how the world has been hit by it and all the concerns that people have had. Like we should have just canceled last season. Like I think I was one of the people who was saying we should have just canceled last season. But then when they had the bubble, it was really good. And there were like virtually no COVID issues. Like, you'd have some cases where like Zion had to attend a funeral and you had Lemon Pepper Lou going to the strip club. And you had a couple of odd cases. And like Daniel House apparently had somebody in his room that he wasn't supposed to have. Just like those odd cases. But otherwise, I think that the NBA and also the WNBA will prosper. And I think not only will they prosper, but they will continue to learn from this stuff. And hopefully, like, I think a big question mark was, when will we return to a form of normality in terms of the scheduling and the seasons and all that stuff? Like, I think the fact that they were able to get most of the 72 games this year is a huge success, because they're going to be put right back on track so that next season they can start on a regular timeline. And that will help battle injuries, because players won't have to turn on a dime into a whole new season. Because that was another big problem too. Like, a lot of, like, the separation between seasons was what, 72 days?
Let's see, the season ended in like October.
Right.
And then we restarted in December.
Yeah, like late December.
About 70, not even 70.
Yeah, it's like, it was in that ballpark. So it's like,
it's about 70 something. You're right. It's about 70 something.
Yeah, it's like, you just got finished a grueling, because as entertaining as it was definitely grueling to, like, on their bodies. Like, they're playing games every other day.
Yeah,
because when in regular playoff seasons, and you have a couple days just for travel, but because everybody was there, it was every other day. And you're playing against the best in the world after basically a 3-month layoff for a couple months. You're in the trenches, and the games obviously are more physical because it's playoffs. The whistles are going to be, turned down a little bit. You tone down the whistles. So just having to turn around, I think next season, like, this gives me hope for what next season can be, because this season has gone on so well, despite the scheduling changes and starting late and all that. So, yeah, that's my take on it.
No, that's a good take. I like that. I didn't even think about, like, the hope for, like, future seasons. Like, because things will get better. Just in terms of understand the league and players understanding what they have to do, and then, like, when people get vaccinated and all that, make it better for different, it doesn't decrease the chances of infection and all that just across the board. So yeah, definitely is interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the rest of the season plays out. But yeah, that's it for today's episode of Game Time. And once again, this is Zach, co-hosted by Jamir. And thanks everyone tuning in. We appreciate you guys. Love the support. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at GameTime_podcast, on Twitter at GameTime_ZNJ, as well as Facebook at GameTime with ZNJ, to stay up to date on further content. And to listen to future episodes, you can find us on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts, and pretty much anywhere you can find podcasts. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And we can't wait to talk more basketball on Game Time.